Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. So we've got a very interesting panel right now on shocks, shifts, and silver lining, what's ahead for global seed markets. We're getting into some of the trade problems and the geopolitics. But to kick us off, we have a keynote from Dr. Edwini Kessi, Director, Agriculture and Commodities Division of the World Trade Organization. Edwini, if you could come to the lectern.
I would like to thank the ISF for inviting me to deliver keynote remarks in this afternoon's session. The topic of our panel is shocks, shifts, and silver linings. And organizers have asked us to look ahead to see what markets can expect in the future. There is no question that we are living through a period of exceptional and persistent turbulence in the global policy environment. At the same time, I would like to stress that global markets for food and agriculture are more resilient than we sometimes think. And we are very grateful to the ISF for being among those who have spoken out to defend the importance of global rules in underpinning well-functioning markets. I would like to address three main issues. One, how do the shocks and shifts affect global markets? And what do they mean for our ability to achieve shared goals? Two, what are the silver linings and how is trade relevant? And lastly, looking ahead, what more can be done? So, I think we all know that, since April of last year, we have been living through a period of great uncertainty. In fact, the main reason for the WTO, why countries joined the WTO, is because of the security and predictability that the WTO provided to the trading system. In fact, countries which want to join the WTO want to do so because of the predictability. They don't want their products to be subject to arbitrary tariff changes. And above all, we also had a robust, or we still do have a robust dispute settlement system. In fact, it is stated in the WTO dispute settlement understanding that it is a central element in providing security and predictability to the multilateral trading system. But we have seen that over this period that the core rules of the WTO are under attack, or they have been undermined significantly. Whether it is the most favored nation principle, or security and predictability of market access, the national treatment principle. So we have seen a lot of changes in recent years or recent months. Then we have also seen other imbalances or other turbulences, whether it is the Strait of Hormuz, we have seen the war, Russia, Ukraine, and also recently the Persian Gulf. So we have seen a lot of shocks to the system. Nevertheless, I would like to say that the system, if you look at the WTO system, for the past 80 years, has provided the framework for there to be a tremendous expansion of global trade. As I mentioned earlier this morning, global trade last year amounted to $33 trillion, the agricultural sector, $2 trillion. And this was made possible as a result of the rules that we have underpinned by a robust dispute settlement mechanism. The seed industry has also benefited from the system provided by the WTO. The total seed trade is estimated to be around 90 billion, and that has benefited from a number of WTO agreements, including the agreement on agriculture. Under the agreement on agriculture, we have seen that WTO members have agreed to reduce their tariffs. Although tariffs on agricultural products remain higher than industrial products, but nevertheless, from 13%, we see that global average tariffs on agricultural products are around 6%. We have also the agreement on sanitary and phytosanitary measures, as I mentioned earlier this morning, UNCTAD has just come out with a study which indicates that for 88 countries, the burden of non-tariff measures actually exceeded the tariff measures. So it is an important area. And the WTO agreement on sanitary and phytosanitary measures actually strikes a careful balance on the one hand between the right of countries to adopt measures to promote or safeguard human, animal, plant health and life, at the same time also insisting that the country's measures, SPS measures, should be based on science. And this is very important for the seed industry, because we have seen that some countries sometimes ignore international standards and adopt measures which restrict trade. So by having the SPS agreement, we have seen that a number of countries have to base their measures on the standards of three main institutions: the Codex Alimentarius, the IPPC, the International Plant Protection Convention, and the World Organization for Animal Health. Once countries base their measures on the standards of these three institutions, they are presumed to be WTO consistent. And if a country wants to exceed the international standards, it would have to justify or provide an adequate risk assessment. The same with the TBT agreement. The TBT agreement also draws a distinction between technical regulations on the one hand, standards and conformity assessment procedures. Countries have the right to adopt TBT measures, but they must have a legitimate objective. Otherwise, they cannot have that. In addition to three main agreements which are relevant to the seed sector, we also have in our rule book or toolbox the agreement on trade facilitation, the subsidies agreement, TRIMS, trade-related investment measures, which is called TRIMS, then intellectual property, which is also very important for the seed industry. I was talking about agriculture, so you can see how tariffs have fallen, but still they remain above industrial products. So there is a lot of work to do, because for farm products, including seeds and others, we see that the tariffs are higher. So we need to work to bring down the level of tariffs for agricultural products. Now, we have also seen that agricultural trade has increased fivefold, and this is because of the security and predictability provided by WTO rules. Last year, 2 trillion. So we have seen that notwithstanding the shocks, we have seen a tremendous expansion in the growth of trade across all sectors, whether it's trade in services, trade in manufactured products, as well as trade in agricultural products. Now, this tells you how, since April last year, we have seen a lot of variation in tariffs. The United States, before April of last year, the average tariffs of the United States was between 2 to 2.5%, but now it's about 13.5%. But for other countries, they have remained the same. So this is an important point, because countries did not respond to the US measures by also increasing their tariffs. So currently we have 72% of global trade taking place on an MFN basis. It would have been catastrophic if countries had responded to the US by also increasing their tariffs. Then that would have taken us back to the 1930s, and we all know what happened, the Great Depression. So this also shows the faith that countries have in the rules-based system. Now, we need to also be conscious of the challenges facing the agricultural sector. Apart from the increased tariffs or the uncertain tariff environment, we also have, climate change, which is affecting the sector. We do have, extreme weather events, weather and precipitation patterns changing, disease and pest prevalence. And so we also need to deal with that. And the agricultural sector itself is also contributes to global warming. So how do we ensure agricultural production in a much more environmental or sustainable basis? And here again, I think seeds can play a role in reducing the environmental footprint of the agricultural sector. Now, the WTO is concerned about food security, In fact, one of the reasons why we have not been able to successful in the agricultural negotiation is how do we deal with food security? All the members agree that it is paramount. According to the FAO, around 670 million people, about 8.2% of the global population, face extreme hunger, chronic hunger, and malnutrition. So the WTO is quite concerned about it, and we want our rules to help countries to bring down the level of malnourished, hungry people. So this is one of the core objectives for the WTO, and we do believe that seas have a critical role to play in alleviating hunger and also ensuring productivity gains. Now, what are the silver linings, irrespective or notwithstanding the shocks? Like I mentioned, it is quite heartening that a lot of our countries still trade under WTO rules. 72%, before the US, it was in the high 80s, but now we see 72% of global trade being done on an MFN basis. So this shows the confidence countries have in the rules-based system. Obviously, we cannot be complacent, but to date, we have seen that countries have exercised restraint. They are now trying to see how we could actually strengthen the system for the benefit of all countries. We have seen the tremendous expansion. The WTO is not a perfect institution. We need to make it fit for purpose, and WTO reform is very important. You know, we haven't updated our rule book since 1995. The global economy has undergone profound changes, and the rule book is outdated, and nobody can deny that. But I think, as we say, it would be a mistake to throw the baby with the bathwater. The system has served the world very well. We need to address the challenges, and that would involve countries making the necessary compromises. The answer does not lie in walking away from the system. As I said, it has served the world so well, and countries should realize that. In fact, the former US Trade Representative, Robert Lighthizer, once said that if there was no WTO, we still have to create one. If we have a proliferation of bilateral and regional trade agreements, it is not a perfect substitute for the rules-based system. Issues like climate change, issues like subsidy reform can only be done on a multilateral basis rather than taking a regional approach. So it is quite heartening that the members are continuing to do so. Even if we look at most of the free trade agreements being concluded, they are more influenced by WTO rules, whether it is in the area of trade remedies, in the area of subsidies. WTO rules inform or guide most of the negotiations. So countries are not turning their back on the rules-based system. Now, it is true that if we look into the future, it's not been very easy for the WTO. We just had our ministerial meeting in Yaoundé in Cameroon, and we did not get substantive results at that meeting, especially in the area of agriculture. The positions of the countries were too far apart. Although countries have stressed on numerous occasions that agriculture is very important to them, we need to level the playing field. As I've said, in the agriculture negotiations, we do have 7 core negotiating issues. 1, domestic support reform. The OECD estimates that countries provide around $630 billion annually to support their farm sectors. In the area of public stockholding for food security, an issue of importance to developing countries, but there are concerns of the exporting countries that public stockholding programs can also be trade distorting. How do we achieve a balance, on the one hand, to ensure that if countries have such programs, it will be for the food security of their people, but not to export the excess in global markets to depress world market prices. We also have to deal with market access, the special safeguard mechanism, export restrictions, which is very important because one of the experiences we have had is that in times of global crisis, once countries impose export restrictions, the impact, it can have a very chilling effect on trade because it will lead to other countries replicating such measures, and that will push up prices. So we have avoided that, notwithstanding the current crisis. Countries have exercised restraint, in imposing export restrictions. So that is a good thing. But we still have a lot of work to do in terms of, trying to have a WTO fit for purpose. All the countries agree that we need reform, but obviously they start from different starting points. Now, what can be done? I think it is important, as I've stressed, the rules-based multilateral trading system created after the end of the Second World War has delivered. We have seen so many people lifted out of absolute poverty. We have seen living standards across the world increase, whether it's from Africa. I come from Ghana, and I can see the improvements as a result of increased trade. The lives of people have actually improved as a result of Ghana being able to sell more gold, more cocoa, and that's the same story in many African countries. Although African countries have been less successful in harnessing trade to achieve greater poverty reduction or alleviation of poverty. But we have seen that trade works, and we should actually keep our eye on that, and then we need to adopt measures. It's not a zero-sum game. Countries need to make the necessary concessions which would enable us to have a strengthened rules-based system. We all know the benefits of that. The alternative to a rules-based system is one of discretionary arbitrariness, and we all know that is not good for investment. Companies may not take the necessary investment decisions because of instability or unpredictability. So I think it is a call that all of us have a role to play. The C sector would need to talk to our governments to ensure that they actually adopt proposals which will strengthen but not weaken the rules-based system. WTO on its part, as I said, we are after the setback at Yaoundé, we are back to the drawing board, we are talking to the members, and we want to know how we could restart. We have a lot of issues on our table, whether it is digital trade, agriculture, subsidy reform, both industrial subsidies as well as agricultural subsidies. So there's a lot of issues that we need to make progress on. So I think the future, we cannot be complacent, but we have seen this before. In 2016, we saw that countries came together, and then, we had a very successful meeting in Nairobi, and I do hope that countries will come back together. They know that the system has worked. We just need to go the extra mile to strengthen the system rather than to turn our backs, because I think it would be very catastrophic if we did that. So I think I'll just stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edwini. If you could sit back down. Thank you. That was a great way to begin. If I could just invite the rest of our panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Lorena.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Lorena. I am ISF Vice President. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Arthur. So I'm a French farmer. In 1 hour north of Paris, I grow wheat, barley, corn, rapeseed, and sugar beet. And I'm also a consultant for a company called Argus. We are providing some analysis on the ag market, but also energy and oil market. And we are trying to forecast some price movement.
Good afternoon. My name is Hanni Rosenbaum. I'm Executive Director of Business at OECD, which is the official business voice to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. To start with, I would like to thank you for the invitation and would like to congratulate ISF for this fantastic conference. It's really great to feel the positive energy when you walk into the hall.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on a few things that you spoke about in the keynote, maybe to discuss with the panel. From the WTO perspective, what feels most different about the current global trading environment compared with a decade ago?
Certainly, I think we have seen, or we are going through a period of excessive instability, which is not good for countries, which is also not good for businesses. 10 years ago, we had a setback. Remember, the first Trump administration also imposed increased tariffs on steel and aluminum, but it was limited in scope. But now it is much more wider. So that is one of the differences 10 years ago, we also had a robust dispute settlement system. We had a two-tier system. We had the panel stage and the appellate body stage. Now, because of disagreement, the appellate body has not been functioning since December 2019. So we have a lot of differences between 10 years ago and now. But like I mentioned, we also saw that after the global financial crisis in 2008, and food prices went through the roof, countries got together in Nairobi and agreed on the decision to outlaw export subsidies, which were thought to be one which really affected or undermined the food security of countries. So I'm quite hopeful that notwithstanding that we are going through a period of excessive turbulence, but countries would realize, and I think countries do realize the importance of the WTO. So I'm quite hopeful that they'll come together and then adopt the necessary measures which will see a resurgent WTO, one that is fit for purpose, one which will be able to serve the interests of businesses and actually lead to improved living standards across the world.
Thank you. Arte, how's all this translating into agricultural markets? What are the assumptions that no longer hold in the way that they once did?
I mean, I think we have been living now in a different world for several years right now. We moved from a world of cooperation to a world with many disruptions. I think it changed a lot of things for our business. It forces us to be, I would say, more agile. We need some agility right now, and it's very important because it changed everything in our business. Just two examples for that. The first one, for example, in Black Sea, so just with the geopolitical events we all know. Black Sea, I would say with Ukraine and Russia, for example, were a very captive market for our seed industry several years ago. And we can understand that as over the past 10 years, if you can imagine, just Russia increased their wheat production by plus, I would say, 35 million tons. Plus 35 million tons, which is the equivalent of the French output, for example, which is the leader for the production in Europe. So I would say, benefit for the whole seed industry until the European Commission decided to suspend export to those countries. And I would say it's very important to highlight that point because it forced us, as I say, to be more agile on that market. And after this geopolitical event, we also have some, I would say, shift in strategy for certain countries. For example, in the US, in United States, in 1980, something like that, they accounted for 17% of the wheat production around the world. Now it's only 7%. So they came from 17% in terms of market share to 7%. So just imagine if one of your industry just had invested a lot in one sector, which is the wheat industry in US, we missed something. And the US moved from the wheat market to the corn market. They developed a lot with the science, as you well know. They increased, for example, the corn yield from 4.5 tons per hectare to now more than 11 tons per hectare. So it changed a lot of things. So we have to now work with the weather, with regulation, with the geopolitical event, and with the strategy of certain countries. So it changed a lot of things. And as I said, we need to be agile on that.
There's a lot of pressure on farmers then to respond to a lot of overlapping factors. Hani, from the perspective of the broader business community, what concerns you most about the direction the global trading environment is taking?
Yeah, I think an overarching concern is really that trade uncertainty is no longer an exception, it's the norm. It has happened for the last couple of years, and that's not just for the seeds industry, it's for business broadly. So companies now have to spend much more time on risk management as compared to looking for new opportunities. So it's like a completely new environment. If I may, I'd just like to give you a little flavor of like the general sentiment in the business community. We just carried out our economic survey among our national member organizations, which include different sectors, and just to give you some of the key highlights, which shows the nervosity that is in business at the moment. So 80% of our members see economic stagnation as a given at the moment. For 90% of our members, the two biggest barriers are geopolitical uncertainty, high energy prices, and then 70% of our members expect trade barriers and distortions to the global level playing field will decrease economic activity in the near future. So on trade specifically, we identify growing fragmentation as a key barrier, diverging markets, they're reshaping supply chains, and business has to be ready for it, but it creates a lot of uncertainty. So this predictability is gone for business. Second, they're very concerned about the growing distortions in terms of export restrictions. Just to mention another sector, and that is critical raw materials, which are hugely important for business across sectors. Since 2009, export restrictions have increased fivefold, a huge problem for business. And then in general, the regulatory divergence, be it in ESG, be it in the area of digital, there's a lot of fragmentation in data flows, in cybersecurity, and this increases costs. And then just last but not least, the situation in the Strait of Hormuz has really shown the world that we cannot take open trade routes, open transport routes, and stable energy prices for granted. So it has had huge implementations on supply chains, not just fertilizers, also other chemical supply chains, and the high energy costs are a break to competitiveness of business broadly.
Yeah, I don't know about anyone else, but I think I've been surprised by just how many products or chemicals are impacted by the Strait of Hormuz, beyond the obvious. Lorena, how does that growing uncertainty that Hani talked about translate into the day-to-day decision-making for seed businesses operating across borders?
Okay, I present as ISF Vice President, but now I'm going to change my hat and talking about Vaso Semilla, because my role here is talk about from the approach of the seed companies. So I think that what I have a question is how the farmers will access to innovation if the seeds are not going to arrive in time or even not arrive. So that is my question. I think that since my grandfather was in ISF in the Congress, we always talk about phytosanitary issues. Today are the same, certification issues, custom procedures that are more important. And in the last few years, we have tensions in many parts of the world, fragmentation that we have been talking about. And now we have two issues. That is, one is how to move the technology, because it is technology. So the regulation sometimes is not aligned. So how we move innovation with the cities, we don't have this easy way to go from one part to the other. And nowadays, there is another problem that is about the cost of the freight. Because of the geographic tension, the fees are going up and up, or sometimes it's very difficult to arrive to one place because we are in a vessel and the vessel stops in another place, and the containers is in a place that is not the destination place. So we are dealing with these things all the time.
So just to clarify, because there's not been a lot about this, so the increasing cost of freight has impacted the seed industry.
It's important. It's very important. But it's moving. I can't say that it's increasing X%, but depend of the vessel you are, or depend of where you're going because of the way. So, but it's impacting. It's impacting in. We have seen seeds that have good margin and others that not. So, and these kind of things affect the seeds business, and also if we think in all the value chain, they affect the grains also. So it's an issue.
Just on this, Arthur, when global disruptions flare up or intensify, like we've seen recently, where do you first see the effects appearing in agricultural markets?
I think the first effect is on prices, definitely. And we talk about the freight and the increase of the freight, but we also have, for example, with the Strait of Hormuz, a huge increase of the fertilizer market, which is an issue for me as a farmer, but it could also be an issue for you as a seed company. Just for example, we have almost 30% of the global trade urea transiting to the Strait of Hormuz, so which is very important, 30%. Right now, for European industry, for example, it's not an issue as we are importing 25% of our urea from Egypt. But with the increase of the gas prices, the cost of production for urea in Egypt increased a lot. And that's why we had an increase for European farmer by plus 50% of our fertilizer prices this year. It will change everything for me and everything for you, as we will have to change and to adapt our crop rotation. For example, for the corn industry this year, we decided in France to decrease the area by minus 10 to 12%, and we will increase the sunflower, I would say, seed by plus 12%, something like that, just because of the increase of prices, which is not followed by the increase of the grain prices for now. But it will have an impact of the grain inflation, of the food inflation in a mid-term prospect. If we are not seeding wheat or corn, I would say in autumn, for example, it will change a lot of things for you and for me tomorrow and for everybody, as it will increase the food prices, I would say. So price is, I would say, the first thing. And we have many examples for that. For example, if we back in Ukraine in 2022, when Odessa, it was impossible for the Ukrainian operator to export through Odessa. Odessa accounted for 90% of the export from Ukraine before the war. 90%, so it was just a very important door. And with the beginning of the war, it was impossible for the Ukrainian operator to export through Odessa, so they had to adapt, and they exported with the Danube, by truck, by railway, and so on. With a giant, I would say, country as Ukraine in terms of ags, it was impossible to feed the world without Ukraine. So that's why we had to work all together to find a way to export from Ukraine. And the first, I would say, effect of I would say, when Odessa was blocked was on prices. The wheat prices, for example, surged a lot in 2022, and also reshuffled and reshaped, I would say, the global trade around the world. So prices is the first effect.
And what's scary is we haven't seen a huge increase in grain prices since the Strait of Hormuz was effectively closed. So we've got that to come, I guess.
I mean, for now, the main difference, I would say, it's when we are talking about the Strait of Hormuz, we are touching energy hub, not a grain hub. So that's why we can see, I would say, an increase of energy prices before the grain prices, which was not the case, for example, in Ukraine. But let's see, with El Niño in Australia, we say with less area seeded during the autumn this year around the world, with, I would say, the lack of fertilizer for a country as India or Brazil, it could, I would say, the food inflation could come, but in a mid-term prospect, not in a short-term prospect, that it was the case with Odessa.
Thank you. Hani, when businesses are dealing with this level of unpredictability and fragmentation, where can international corporations still make a practical difference?
First of all, I think it can make, and it will have to make, an important difference. So in particular, in times of volatility, unpredictability, and fragmentation, we need this platform that international organizations can provide. Let me say a few words about the OECD, which is the organization we work with. And first, of course, it provides this platform where the market-based economies can get together and address the challenges in the trading system. And I think we should not underestimate the importance of continued dialogue to make sure that escalation doesn't happen, to make sure that we can coordinate policies where needed. So in just 2 weeks, we have the Ministerial Council meeting at the OECD, which will allow trade ministers to get together in a non-negotiating business environment. Then second, I think we continue to need international organizations a lot to provide the evidence. We can only address trade distortions, export restrictions, when we can measure them. So hugely important. And let me also briefly refer to the Agricultural Market Information System, AMIS, which was set up in 2011 following the food crisis. and which is an interagency platform which helps increase market transparency for the food market and take coordinated action. So it's a really, really important platform. Then the third point I wanted to highlight is that we need international organizations to speak up for open trade. Like the WTO, I think WTO needs some support, and OECD is an organization that speaks up loudly about the importance of open trade. Now that as countries are becoming more and more inward-looking, we cannot underestimate this important business voice. Also on supply chains, there's a lot of coordination that is going on at international organizations like the OECD, which clearly speaks up in favor of cooperation, transparency, partnership, and diversification, and not just to relocalize it all and close it all. And then, of course, there's the issue of regulatory fragmentation I mentioned earlier, where international organizations have a very important role. Again, I think everybody here in the room knows the OECD seed scheme, which is really important to help through certification, build the trust between importing and exporting countries. But there are many other examples. I always mention the mutual acceptance of data program at the OECD, which avoids duplicative data requirements in chemical testing, and as such saves business 300 million euros a year. So very important to have these international organizations to support open and rules-based trade and to support the WTO in these important efforts.
Thank you. Lorena, just back to you quickly. I mean, with these pressures and the fast pace of change that we're seeing, are seed businesses having to adapt how they operate across regions and supply chains, or are they going to have to? Are you foreseeing big changes ahead?
Yes, it's vital to work across regions all over the world because it's in terms of companies, there are three things that we have to think, and two of them is more than from a country. The first is to planting earlier, of course. The second is how to manage the stocks. Maybe we have to think where the stocks have to be in your place or in another country or wherever. And the other is how to diversify our operation in terms of research, in terms of production, sites, whatever. So in that point, I think that ISF at this Congress are so important because we put all the players together in one side, because sometimes in this kind of environment it's so impossible to do everything like in my country, to do everything in Argentina. So you need partners because maybe the production have to be in another place, or to split or whatever, or to do research in one place and then to move to the other. So I think that this kind of places is so important because we have to think in more than one scenario. We need to have plan A, B, and C or more. So that is important. And just to close, this is just to, we have to think that one opportunity, the challenge for one country maybe is the opportunity to the other. So that is important to think, because the seed business have to move and move and move. We need to produce food for the others. So that is important, this kind of places.
Thank you. Edwini, it sounds like predictability and this fragmentation is a huge problem in terms of maintaining a resilient agricultural trade system. I mean, what are the biggest gaps that you see today, and how can we fill them?
From the WTO perspective, as I mentioned, we have robust rules. Countries have what we call bound tariffs, whereby they undertake not to increase the tariffs. We also have rules which discipline non-tariff measures, so the SPS agreement, the TBT agreement. And for the large part, a lot of countries are still abiding by their obligations. So it is quite comforting that, as I mentioned, around between 72 to 73% actually of trade still takes place under WTO rules. So in as much as we have the disruptions, I think the WTO members are keen, and we do hope that, countries will come back together and adopt the necessary measures. We have the agriculture negotiations. Regrettably, they haven't been successful, but countries have said that they really want to see the negotiations succeed, to bring down the level of tariffs, to discipline subsidies, because the OECD, as I mentioned, estimates that countries provide around $630 billion a year to support the agricultural sector. But out of this amount, only a small portion is devoted to general services like research, innovation, and the rest. So we do hope that countries would realize that it is important for them to press ahead with the negotiations. We also have new issues that we need to deal with. Climate change is here with us. We need to see how we can embed environmental sustainability into the negotiations, which we haven't done so far, but it's very important. So I think once we deal with all these issues, we will manage to have a vibrant system which will be fit for purpose and which would actually bring back confidence in the rules-based system. But it will take time, but I think we all need to work collaboratively together to ensure that it happens.
Thank you. Just trying to think of some silver linings on this. I mean, Lorena, Edwini mentioned climate change. One of the solutions to agriculture's sustainability problem is often touted as seeds. I just wondered if you see that as an opportunity for the seed sector.
Yes. I mentioned before that challenges are opportunities.
Yeah.
And for me, challenges are opportunities. So climate change, of course. We have a population that is growing, more people in a lot of years, a lot of need of nutrition. They need different things. That is one hand, and in the other hand, we have problems about production because climate change. Maybe you have to grow in a moment that you have flow, you have extreme temperatures, whatever. So these are challenges for the seed sector. So, and another thing is about maybe you have pests or disease you have been talking about that you never have. So the production is under tension, is under pressure. So this is an opportunity. And we, from the seed sector, we are working so much in innovation to solve problems of the farmers. So that is the opportunity. The opportunity is how to increase food, how to increase fuels in terms of energy, and how to increase feed. So that is our challenges. And this, how to solve, is about innovation.
Yeah.
So it's opportunity.
Thank you. Arthur, just to put your farmer hat on, I mean, how are farmers adapting in practice to this new environment in terms of trade and also sustainability?
So firstly, I would like to say that I 100% agree with Lorena on that part, but yeah, the situation is challenging for farmers, I would say, worldwide. We must deal with weather because we are on a living system. We cannot grow everything everywhere at all time. That's important just to highlight that point.
Yeah.
And after that, we have to deal with weather, with regulation, with geopolitics, with trade dynamic, and so on. But that's why I'm talking about the crop rotation in some years, as I said previously. But I would like, as a farmer, to give you a message of optimism today, because we need to feed a growing population. We need grain to feed population. We need grain also for the crisis industry regarding the biofuel. So with innovations, definitely innovation will be the key. And we have to rely on science. I mean, it's not you will complain with that, but we have to rely on science. Definitely, it's very important. We have to remove a barrier on innovation. We have to rely on science, as I say. We have to work on some NBT or GMO as you want. I think it's very important for me as a farmer, as we have to adapt on this system. So yes, a very, I would say, optimistic message for you. I think we have to play a key role for the future, you and me as a farmer, but definitely we have to understand all together, and our politician has to understand that it's definitely very important to produce, because we have to feed the world. That's, I would say, our key role for now.
Thank you. And Hani, what kinds of cooperation or coordination are becoming more important? Is there any opportunity for the OECD and how it works with businesses, how it listens to businesses in a changing environment? Is there a space for adaptation or growth there?
It's good, but there's always space for adaptation and growth, of course. We have an excellent cooperation, as I mentioned, in the area of supply chains, and this will continue. I'd maybe just like to follow up on the message of optimism, because there's also some optimistic news that came from the OECD just last week. On the issue of sustainability, the OECD published its environmental data just a week ago, and it found that in the OECD, since 1990, the agricultural output has increased by 33%, while the land use has decreased by 11%. So if you can do it in the OECD, you can do it elsewhere. I think it's a really, really good signal to show what innovation can do to address environmental challenges and to increase productivity. I fully agree with previous speakers. Innovation is really the way to go. From the Business at OECD side, we have had a very active program on digital farming, where we see also a lot of opportunity to improve productivity and increase sustainability. And since you asked about, can we influence international organizations? Absolutely yes. We got this issue on the OECD program of work. So we can influence how international organizations work. And then if I may, I'd just like to mention one other issue which is not related to innovation or sustainability, but which is hugely important for the resilience of the sector, and that is illicit trade. I think we have to take a concerted effort in fighting illicit trade, which is a huge problem across sectors. I mean, globally, it represents $400 billion every year. It's an increasingly important issue for the seeds industry. We were delighted that ISF participated in the recent OECD meeting on anti-illicit trade, and I would encourage you all to actively contribute to these discussions, which are in our joint interest. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I just wanted to see if anyone in the audience had any questions for our panelists. Any questions? We've got one here. Is there a microphone? Or just one here, yeah. If you stand up, just say where you're from and...
Hello. Well, this is Tut. Well, I'm Carlota. I'm a PhD student, and I came here representing the youth ambassadors from NG. And well, thanks for the talk. It was great to hear. And I had a question. I mean, when we speak about uncertainty, we often focus on risk. And I wanted to know, I mean, for the young generations, where do you see the most promising opportunities in the seed sector? For example, in the climate resilience breeding, in seed regional production, in digital traceability, or in partnerships between public and in private institutes, or maybe in another aspect, I don't know.
Who wants to take that? Where's... Did you have anyone in mind that you'd like to hear from?
Yeah, sorry. To Lorena and Arthur, I think maybe they will be the best.
Okay. I think that our sector is so interesting. So there are opportunities in all the areas that you said. If you want to work in regulatory, there are a lot of things to do. If you want to work in innovation, in technology, this is a sector that we have a lot of things to do and a lot of challenges. The seed sector is technology. Okay. At the end, it's innovation. It's innovation. So it's interesting. Wherever part of the company, if I look my company, if I look the other companies that I know, there are many things to do, very, very interesting for young people. I hope our seed company, the seed industry, be so good for the young generation.
Okay, thank you. And also, I wanted to ask you, as a PhD student, I don't know how it's in Argentina or in other countries, but in Spain, we are facing problems in order to jump from academy to industry, in order to keep going with science. So, what do you think in other countries, how that is going? Like,
En Spanish. ¿Cuál es la
vale.
pregunta exacta del problema de entrar?
O sea, yo, por ejemplo, ahora quiero saltar a la industria. Bueno, me gustaría si fuera posible, pero no se nos valora, siento que no se nos valora eso en España, nuestra habilidad científica. Quería saber, en un ambiente, en otros países, a manera internacional, si tú crees que habría hueco pues, para mí o para otros investigadores en la industria.
I'm sure that, now I change to English. I'm sure.
Sorry.
No, but it's part of this world.
Yeah.
A lot of language. I think that see this technology. So companies are open to new ideas, very open to new ideas. So we need to find the way. If you, from your perspective, think that is not open, we have to find a way to link to you, because we need this generation. Because in some way, the seed have to make solution to others, so we need to think out of the box, and the new generation is thinking out of the box. So I'm sure that the companies are open, and we will welcome people like you that study science.
Thank you. That gives me hopes, to be honest.
Thank you.
And just to add something, I think we need the seed industry. It's really easy to say that, but we need the seed industry. I need seed every year. Every single year, I need a seed on my farm. So be sure that you will have a lot of opportunity to grow your business in the seed industry.
Thank you. It's really nice to hear from the youth. Yes, we've got one more question here. If you could just go to the microphone.
Alfredo Paseiro for Argentine Seed Association. For Dr. Ewing, with your vision regarding the multilateral system, what will happen? Survive or not?
Oh, it's a big one.
I think the WTO will survive. I mean, if you look at even recent statements made by the U.S. Trade Representative, Jermaine Greer, in as much as he has issues with the WTO, he thinks that the WTO needs reform urgently, but he was pointedly asked if the United States was going to leave the WTO, and his response was no. But like I said, we don't have to be complacent. The WTO has served the world well, but it needs to be fit for purpose. Before the Trump administration, we actually had a lot of issues. The rule book hasn't been updated for 30 years. The members are very entrenched. Their views are very entrenched. So I think we all need to do what is necessary. The responsibility lies with all the WTO members to come together. The WTO works when countries make compromises. And I think we need to do that. You know, the approach where it's winner takes all doesn't work. Countries, we have, WTO, we have 166 members. We need to strive to reach agreements which would benefit all the countries. And I think with that spirit, if countries realize that they all benefit, because currently the problem we have is that there are a number of countries who feel that they are not getting benefits from the system, that the benefits are, have accrued to mostly developed countries and a handful of developing countries, China, India. The rest of the countries are operating at the periphery of the trading system. So once we have a much more inclusive system where all countries see that they have a stake in the system, then I think multilateralism will flourish. We have been talking about innovation. We need to have secure, predictable rules. If you don't have secure, predictable rules, it's very difficult for companies to make the necessary investment. So my short answer is that the WTO will survive, and I think multilateralism, sometimes we take things for granted, but if we go back into the 1930s, the evolution of society, we see that there is a role for multilateralism, and we shouldn't lose sight of that fact.
Thank you. We've got, okay, time for one more question very quickly at the back there.
I'm very tall, sorry. My name is Zainab Gwadabe. I run a seed company in Nigeria. So I just want to add to what Lorena said to respond to your question. So as a young person leading a seed company in Africa, you're asking of the opportunity, like where to focus on. If I don't speak for African youth, I think I can speak for the Nigerian youth. So whatever you are doing, I think it is very important to align it to technology. Our generation like technology. So innovation is very important. We don't, this generation, my generation, our generation, we don't like to keep doing the same thing over and over again. My Ghanaian brother, I think you can say to this that in Nigeria, in Africa, West Africa especially, we have a lot of materials and resources that we've been using for 40 years, right? But this generation, we don't want that. We want innovation. We want solution to our daily problems. We don't want to keep using what our grandparents use. So technology, innovation, very important. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think, yeah, we'll give it a clap. I don't think that was more of a statement than a question, but very helpful. Does anyone have any concluding remarks just as the time finishes? Yes, Lorena?
No, only 3 words.
Yes, go for it.
Seed is life.
Yeah.
Is that this?
Well, if no one has anything else to add, I think that's a very nice way to finish. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for your questions and for your attention.